All right, let's get started here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the 2023 ISP Virtual Summit powered by Preseam. This session is all about turn down the churn. I'll be one of our speakers. I'm Gerrit Nagelhout, the CEO of Preseam. I spent quite a bit of my time in customer success these days, working with a number of our customers and really helping them with this. So it's something that comes up almost daily for me. And I'd like to introduce Georgette from Sonar. She is a strategic account director there as well. Thanks for joining, Georgette.
Thank you, Gerrit.
All right, and I'll hand it over to you to start here.
Well, the team at Sonar really believes that data-driven decision-making is a hallmark of a strong and thriving business. The actionable insights you gather through reporting come from leveraging data points specific to your business. And whether you're a small operator or providing services across multiple states, business intelligence helps you to stay competitive. When the team at Preseam reached out to me to join on today's call, I was very excited because I know how important tracking churn and acting on that data is for operators across the globe. So first things first, what is churn? When I'm talking to a startup ISP or even some of the smaller operators that are coming to our platform, it's not uncommon that I receive a little bit of a pushback on setting up ways for them to track why a customer has left their service. I don't have the time to keep up with that, or you can't make everybody happy, or some pretty common responses. But if you have an easy system in place from day one, whoever is taking the call from the customer can quickly gather the information as they're processing the request. This is going to give you the data that you need to make the adjustments that your business requires. Whether it's a custom field or on the actual account, or a brief exit survey to attached to a support ticket, asking for feedback from your former customers will actually help you grow your business. Not everyone will answer the question, but you can use the information that you gather to ensure that there isn't an issue that you can address. We might even consider a win-back marketing campaign with customers who went over to a different provider 6 or even 12 months down the line. Whatever the case, it's important to keep tabs on how many of your customers are leaving, why they're leaving, and if there's anything that you can do to lower that churn rate. So, how do we measure churn? Well, as you can see, the calculation for churn is really quite straightforward. We want to look at the total number of customers who left your service and calculate that percentage over the time period we're reviewing. I know operators that track churn on a weekly basis and others that dig in deeper at the end of each month or the end of each quarter. The sooner you start tracking your percentages, the easier it is to identify a deficit that can be corrected. But more on that later in our presentation. To keep things super simple, let's think about what happens if you lose 100 customers over the course of one calendar year. And for example, maybe the average cost of your most popular service is around $70 per month. If we multiply the 12 months of the year times the 100 customers of lost revenue, that's a staggering $84,000 that you won't have available to grow your business in the new year. We really want to be able to address those concerns. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about not just the $84,000, but what are other financial impacts that need to be considered when you're looking at your churn numbers. You know, there are additional financial impacts of churn that you should really consider. It costs so much more in your sales and marketing effort, as well as property and equipment needed to convince a customer to buy your service or your additional products. When you have to spend 5 times more to acquire the new customer to refill the funnel for the customer that just left, it really drives home why you want to chase the data. Your existing customers already know you and they trust you. So when you offer a new service opportunity, it is much easier to close the sale on that new offering. And often your customers are an important part of your sales team. Losing a customer that's previously referred new business to you is an even bigger hit to your bottom line because these influencers can really change the bottom line of your company. If you want your business to be simple, We want your business to be simple. Everybody wants your business to be simple, right? Which means that the business intelligence data that you're gathering about churn needs to be consumable in a way that you want to receive it. It may be quick access to a graph or a CSV file that hits your inbox every Monday or on the first day of the month. The data should help drive your business decisions. Organizationally, you need to determine when it makes sense for you to review this information. Who is going to develop the plan to address the findings and how you'll make adjustments along the way. And speaking of adjustments, one of the most common reasons that customers leave is dissatisfaction with your service. So I'm going to hand it over to Garrett to talk to you about how we can drill down and turn down the churn.
Yeah, thanks so much, Georgette. And I'd imagine it is critical to start this data collection right up front when it isn't an issue yet, because if you don't have all that history, you can't see the trending. And when it is a real problem, you've lost a bunch of data at that point.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how often I have customers who are like, well, I feel like my churn isn't really very much of a problem. But when you start drilling down to the data, you can hone in on those issues, which I know Perceive can help people with.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly when we have calls with various customers, some have excellent churn data and some really don't. And if you don't, you're guessing. Like, it's hard to make ROI decisions and things like that as well. So definitely good to have all that in place, of course. All right, so for this part, I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of real world examples that we've come across as Perceive, and then really focused on how do you decrease it? Like, what are different things that you can do? So I'll start off with one of our actually, this is our first customer, Evergent. We deployed there when Perceive was very early on. I am very happy they gave us the opportunity to do so. We didn't blow up their network, but boy, it was the code was pretty rough still in those days. And what we later found out is the reason they were so keen to work with us is they were installing new customers every month, but they were actually losing more every month than they were adding in. And so if you look at the graph here, you can see that the red line is lost customers, right? So how many they lost every month. Blue is how many they gained. And you can see throughout 2016 and the first half of 2017, on average, they were losing more customers than they were gaining. And so they were quite motivated to do whatever they could to solve this problem. And so we started working with them. We deployed Perceive in May 2017. It was only monitoring at that point to try and find the issues, which started working with. And then a few months later, we started turning on the shaping, the optimization as well. And you can see on the right here, the numbers for churn just dropped, right? All of a sudden, every month, they were now losing far fewer customers than they were adding in, and they were growing again. And since then, they've grown quite a lot. They've actually sold the business recently as well, but they're much bigger now than they would have been if it hadn't been for somebody's efforts. And so some particular stats that we saw is about a 28% reduction in churn after 6 months. That saved them 63 customers. And in that 6-month time frame alone, that was $27,000. Now, there's different sort of dollar values you can use, and Georgette, you talked about some of that as well. We put together a little spreadsheet that makes it, I know this is math. All of you can probably do math just fine. If you want the spreadsheet, I'm happy to share it with anybody. It always astounds me how the compounding of this adds up, right? I'll just quickly walk you through this. So I had another conversation with one of our customers a few days ago. They have 12,000 subscribers. And let's say the ARPU is $80, whether it's 70, 80, it's going to be similar. Their monthly churn in January, which they are watching like a hawk because it had been going up, was 1.33%. And so that meant they lost 159 customers and they added 87 more. We have Perceive running in a very small test part of their network that's about to expand to the rest of it. But if you look at the math here, losing 159 customers the first month, that costs $12,000 every month. The next month, do that again. That's another 12,000. But now you're at 24,000 total, and you keep doing that: 36,000, 50,000, 75,000. By the end of 1 year churn at 1.3%, they would have lost $147,000 every month. If you add that up for the year, that's $1 million just for that. Extend that out further. The second year it's 4 million and becomes 8 million the third year. Like, this is just the math is staggering and all this stuff, and it's it's just that compounding effect is really crazy. So I just wanted to highlight that a bit more. Okay, so now that I've scared you all, so what do you do about it, right? So the first headline here sounds kind of simple, right? Delight your customers. Well, of course, you want to delight your customers. Who doesn't want to do that? And so let's drill down a little bit in that. So I think one of the keys to reducing subscriber churn is to deliver a consistent experience, a really good experience, of course, and try and exceed your customers' expectations. And also make sure when I say consistent, don't start off really good and make it worse and worse over time. They will notice that, right? So the consistent part is really important as well. And some of the things that we always work with our customers on, in no particular order, but one of the keys is you have to figure out all the sort of choke points, the bottlenecks in your network, whether it's congested access points or something else. You got to find them, fix them, and you'll find if you do that, your bandwidth will go up for your whole network. This is a good thing. This is not a bad thing, right? More bandwidth means happier customers. Um, of course, you need to offer competitive plan speeds. It depends on who else is providing service in your area. Regardless of what plan speed you have, we recommend setting the subscriber shapers actually a little bit higher. So when they run a speed test, they're going to get just a bit more than they think they're paying for. Again, happiness all around as well with that. And I'm going to go into more detail on all these slides, by the way, in the coming couple slides as well. Um, the next one, which is not necessarily intuitive to everybody, um, most people think about bandwidth, right? If we deliver enough bandwidth, we're going to have happy customers. Well, not necessarily. It turns out that latency is actually often much more important yet than pure bandwidth. If you think about applications like, I don't know, web browsing, Zoom calls like this, gaming, they may not have that much data, that much bandwidth they're using, but the latency has to be both very low and very consistent. You have to have low jitter. And we find that latency is actually a much bigger indicator of a good quality of experience than pure bandwidth is. So this one is super important. We're also big believers, and it's a bit of a philosophy thing, and I'll get more detail on that as well. Whatever techniques you use to optimize, make sure you do so in a way that is generic for all applications, transfer protocols. Don't over focus on squeezing down Netflix or just TCP, or you're going to get yourself in trouble down the line more and more. Um, Also, when your customers do call, offer them the best support. Make sure you have the best tool to put yourself in their shoes, that kind of thing. And really, overall, if you deliver the best quality of experience, you will win. Your customers will absolutely notice that. All right, so let's go into a bit more detail here. So let's start with what are some of the sources that we've seen for poor quality of experience? Many, many places this can come from. The most common one we see with Veseem is your access points. There are so many reasons they can have problems. There can be individual CPEs that are causing issues. You can have interference that can be overloaded. So really understanding those, fixing the issues is critical. Backhauls we see as well, not as often, but when they happen, it tends to be sort of a wider area that has problems. Another very common one is if your RF connection between the access point and the CPE isn't very good, that subscriber is going to get a poor service no matter what, unfortunately. And then, of course, you have in-home Wi-Fi. You might say, well, that's not my problem. It's beyond the demarc point. Well, they're still going to call you. So you might as well be able to detect and at least guide them in the right direction with that. The other thing we found that can cause a lot of issues is the way the shapers you use to enforce your plan speeds, right? So let's say you sell somebody a 20 meg plan. The piece of software or hardware you use to do that has a really big impact on the end user experience when they're using all their data. And what we find is that most shapers out there, so like a MikroTik Simple Q or something built into the radios or even LTE cores, for example, think of them like a single highway. And as soon as that connection maxes out, at the beginning of the highway, you got the shaper and it starts buffering and everything now starts backing up, right? So all of a sudden, your streamers are going to cause problems for your gamers and your web browsing and everything else. And so putting an optimized QE optimized shaper in place can make a massive difference, both in how many support calls you get when your customers max out their plan, and then churn as well, because it absolutely makes quite a big difference. Like anything with QE, if you can't measure it, you can't fix it either. So having the right tools in place for that, of course, is quite important as well. All right, so I talked a little bit about, make sure you have competitive plan speeds. And this, of course, is tricky, right? It depends who you're competing with, what kind of technologies they have. But the one thing that we've really found is we have a lot of data, first of all, and we do an annual fixed wireless report that shows this. And one of the things we did is we compared the actual monthly download usage compared to plan speed, and sort of different percentiles as well of users. So that's the chart on the right here. So along the bottom, along the x-axis, you've got your plan speed, so 5, 10, 50, 100, 500 megabits. And then the y-axis, how many gigabytes did they actually use? So what we found is up to 50 megabits, if you give them more, they tend to use it. Not all the time, but they'll burst to it and things like that. Beyond 50, it really, really tapers off. And so the 99 percentile, these are your heaviest of your heaviest users, right? Up to about 100 megabit, yes, they will use more. But your 80th percentile, so 80% is doing less than that. Above 50 megabits doesn't really change. Your medium flattens out much earlier than that. So you might actually be able to offer a higher plan speed than you think. Now, it depends on your access points, of course, and your radios and all of that. But things like your core network bandwidth, backhauls, you might not find that much difference. And one thing that we've done a number of times for our customers is, you quietly double all the plan speeds behind the scenes. Don't tell anybody. Just see what happens. Watch it for a week. See if there's any new bottlenecks, any new access points that get overloaded. Maybe your network can already handle it. So these are all things that you can use to see if this is something you can improve upon as well. All right, so latency. Yes, I'm going to keep hammering down this point. Optimize for latency. Um, Latency is the number one indicator for good quality of experience. If you keep the latency good, yes, you need to deliver good bandwidth too, but if you have good latency also, you are most of the way there. And really two big things here: measure it, figure out where your problem areas are. We happen to measure it based on the actual traffic going through the network. We're able to do trending. We're able to map subscribers to access points to towers. So we can actually tell you, here's the access points that are red, here's the ones that are yellow, here's the ones that are green, and you can pinpoint exactly where those problems are. On the optimization side, the one sort of magic thing you can do is to turn on good shapers. We like the active queue management based approaches, and really the idea here is it's really quite simple. There's no configuration required other than you need to know the plan speed, turn it on. As soon as you turn this on, you'll see the latency comes way down. You can see, on the sort of the graphic here, this is real deployment we had years ago. And we also happen to prioritize anything small. So think like VoIP calls or browsing or that kind of thing. So, and there's a little more detail behind the scenes, but it's quite straightforward. Really, the goal here is we're not trying to artificially reduce traffic. We want to make sure that even if somebody's maxing out their plan speed, it still feels fast. Again, you want your happy customers. Okay, and then next, so yeah, future-proofing your ISP. This is a bit of our philosophy. Different people can have different debates on this, but this is our viewpoint. And one of the reasons to bring this up, we've recently seen a bit of a resurgence of things like TCP proxies, or accelerators are called sometimes, and deep packet inspection as well. In our review, this is something that was great 15 years ago, not so much anymore. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. TCP proxies, for example, first of all, not all your traffic is TCP anymore. Used to be, but now QUIC is much more common. Major applications like YouTube, Facebook have already switched to QUIC. HTTP3 is based on QUIC now as well, so you're going to see more and more of that. So if you're optimizing just TCP, you're going to be increasing the amount of TCP, decreasing UDP, and it's sort of a net zero. It doesn't really get you ahead. So it's something that we're just not keen on doing. We'd much rather say, what are the bottlenecks in your network? Fix those for everything. Deep packet inspection is a little bit along the same lines. With active queue management techniques these days, you just don't need it anymore. Encryption makes it harder and harder to do. It's just, in our opinion, it's not something you need to deliver a good experience. All right, so next, talking to your customers. So, of course, no one can eliminate all support calls. You will, even if you do all these things, you will get the occasional customer calling in, especially if it's home Wi-Fi issues, things like that. And I think the key here is to make it as painless as possible for your customers. So you need to write tools to understand right away, okay, is the customer having a problem? If you're measuring latency, you can see that. You can see right that, yep, I can see why they're calling. Latency is bad, bandwidth is low, whatever the case might be. And if you can immediately pinpoint to say, okay, I can tell this is an in-home Wi-Fi issue or an issue between the access point and the CPE, or maybe the whole access point is overloaded. If you can have your frontline techs have that easy information available, they can make those calls far more efficient, put your customers through fewer hoops, tests, other things they have to do, and get to the problem resolution a lot faster as well. So I think equipping your frontline staff with the right tools can make a big difference here as well in keeping your customers happy. All right, so let's put it all together. So we see improving QE as really sort of a continuous process. It's not something you do at one time. Unfortunately, with especially fixed wireless, other technology as well, but especially fixed wireless, it will always be a bit of a game of whack-a-mole. And so I think rather than saying, yeah, we'll fix all the stuff once and then forget about it, you need to make it a daily, a weekly, monthly routine and just keep doing that. So, having said that, the one magic thing is the shapers. You turn that on, good things will happen right away. But beyond that, it's really this sort of virtuous loop, right? You constantly want to identify where are the pain points, where are the bottlenecks, where are the high latencies, what's happening on the RF side, which CPEs don't have a good signal. We call it the RF score and Perseem, which ones are having a particularly large impact on the access point because they have both a poor signal and are heavy users, that we call business value score. So you want to constantly look for that, fix it proactively, and stay ahead of it basically, right? And then if you can't, in some cases, if you just can't fix it, right, like there's just too much load on a tower, there's some interference you can't work around, then as a plan B, you can optimize some of the traffic as well. The plan enforcement tends to run all the time, but you can also put shapers on access points. And in the next few months, we'll be releasing a new feature which automates all of that as well, but that's a different discussion. So this is sort of, again, a plan B. If you can't fix it, at least make sure you're not doing buffer bloat and crazy latency and things like that to keep the experience better for your customers. Again, give your front level staff the right tools to troubleshoot the issues for incoming calls, and you just keep doing that. And if you keep doing this proactively, you'll reduce your churn, you grow your business, you'll find you'll increase capacity in your network. Your bandwidth will rise a little bit as you do that. Again, this is a good thing. This will make your network more valuable if you ever are thinking of selling it. There'll be a lot more value in the base network as well. Happy customers make marketing more effective. Fewer support calls make your team more efficient. They can work on proactive things instead, and you'll have more time to focus on growing your business instead. All right, that's it for my portion. At this point, we'll open it up for questions. Thank you so much. All right, so a couple of questions have come in already, and I'll start going through those. So the first question is, what about problems that badly written apps and badly programmed devices have due to CGNAT? Unfortunately, that's not really Q related. That's more of a connectivity problem if you've got port issues or something like that. So that, unfortunately, something you got to just kind of figure out separately from quality of experience. Next question from Brett. We find that 99% of user complaints stem from problems in the user's own equipment and networks, including self-interference. Interested in finding out if you have any tips on analyzing this. Yeah, two things. And so I've talked about it a bit in the last couple of slides, right? So I think it's really two big parts. But first is understanding, what is happening. Is the user getting a bad experience? Seeing if there is somewhere to go dig, and then managed routers are really helpful as well. So if you have a managed router, you can actually log into this device, see what's happening at the device level. That unfortunately is something that I think is the best way to solve that. But inside of Perseem, your support team can see the subscriber latency, they can see the access point latency. And so if you find that subscriber latency is high, access point latency is low, you know it's a problem with the subscriber. All right, that points you in the right direction. Then you can check out the RF with Perseem Plus. You can see RF score to see if that's an issue or not, or dig into the low-level metrics like RSSI. And then if you've eliminated, it's the access point is okay, the signal is good, and you still see that difference between the subscriber latency and the network latency, then you know that, all right, now I got to log into that managed router if you have it, and really try and get to the bottom of what is happening in the home. Yeah. Jordan, I don't feel anything to add to that, but that's my perspective on that side.
I do have customers that try and support their users by providing either in their tickets or on their websites best user practices for things that they can try to troubleshoot to try and eliminate some problems at the user end. And that's always an easy opportunity for empowering your customers to help themselves. So using let's say canned email replies and tickets that have certain devices that might be helpful for that end user, or even things on your website as touch points for your customers to access.
Okay, thanks, Georgia. The next question is, we use Base Sales Cloud Core and set the speeds in there for the user. How would this QE help us? Does this tool help lower the CPU usage of the Base Sales radio? Yeah, so it's very similar to what I was talking about before. With LTE, there's kind of two aspects to it. There's shaping the connection to optimize the experience. Presim will do that. And then LTE often likes to allocate resource blocks and things like that. So I think the ideal setup is to have a QE platform like Presim do the plan enforcement, optimize within that envelope, whether that's 10 meg, 20 meg, 50 meg, whatever. And then I would set if you're able to, the speeds inside of base cells to higher than that, at 10, 15%. That way it can do its resource allocation, but it doesn't have to do the shaping, that sort of blunt hammer of single lane, adding high latency, and Presim takes care of that part. The CPU usage, if you are finding that it's the shapers that are doing that, I'm not sure. If you just offload the shapers to Presim entirely, that might help. Like I've definitely seen cases where CPEs in various gear can't keep up with the shaping very well. So if you turn that off, then yeah, you could get some CPU back, but you have to try it a little bit to make sure that that actually is the problem that's causing the higher CPU load on the base cell CPEs. Okay, good questions.
Absolutely.
Any others? I'll wait that uncomfortable minute or two before calling it a day to give people a chance to type something in. Okay, I think this is probably it here. All right, thank you everybody so much for joining us. Georgette, thank you for being a speaker, and
Absolutely.
enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.